Welcome everyone to the Go Gardening Show. I'm here at the Edwards Aquifer Authority Field Research Park. And I have two of the staff here, and they're going to tell us a little bit about what's going on at this Field Research Park, particularly about the Edwards Aquifer and water. So, Mark.
Yes, sir.
Tell us where we are.
So this is our Field Research Park, our 151-acre research facility where we've endeavored to do a lot of work trying to better understand groundwater and water quality, water quantity. So a lot of the things that you'll see out here are all focused on that, and how do we measure those changes based on slight modifications to the landscape.
Well, there you go. So some things that we could maybe do, or more importantly, all of us as a community can do to change the water.
Well, you know, one of the things we've learned here over the time we've had this facility, which is about 5 years, is the importance of native vegetation. It's just so well adapted to our climate, and it doesn't need a lot of care or water. It seems to survive the droughts pretty well.
Now, Tom, you're more of an expert on the plant materials, aren't you?
Sure.
All right. So tell us a little bit about what you do here.
Okay, so a lot of what I do here is actually evaluating the types of practices that we can put on the landscape and working with our science team on how we can actually measure benefits from those practices in the context of water quality and quantity, but also looking at our vegetation and soils.
Well, I remember last time we were here, we didn't have a lot of this fancy equipment behind me. So shall we go up and
Sure.
and you guys can tell me all about us, or tell us all about us.
Okay.
All right,
Absolutely.
let's go. Well, Thomas, what are these unique pieces of equipment? What are they, and what are they used for?
Sure. So what we have here is
where they are.
Yeah. So what we have here is our continuous soil monitoring plots. So first, to start though, we're standing in our swell of our berm and swell. And what we're trying to look at is how is water interacting in a soil across the profile of this swell. So going from uphill to downhill and within this swell. So the reason there are 3 of these stations is because one is placed above the swell, which we would expect to have less impacts of the swell, more of like a baseline situation. We have one placed within the swell where the water will collect at, and one below the berm to see how water behaves there. Potentially some water could be moving through the soil profile downhill to that location. So that's what we're looking for, and we're measuring multiple parameters here. We have at 10 centimeters deep and at 30 centimeters deep, we have water content, also you could call it soil moisture. We have soil water potential, electrical conductivity, and soil temperature. So when we do get rain, which this hasn't had rain in a while, but it can fill up quite a bit, you know, up to about the area of where we see this grass. It could fill up, and if you were to come back a few hours after that rainfall event, the water would be gone. So that's what we are trying to find out, is where is that water going and what is it doing after it infiltrates. There's a number of places it could go. It could come back out through the plants as transpiration, it could be evaporated, it could infiltrate into the aquifer, it could just be tied up in the area between the aquifer and the land surface for a while, or in the soil. So there's a number of places that water could go, where it could end up coming out down in the creek as a seep.
Well, Mark, Tom just talked about how much water can come into these swales. What does that mean for a homeowner? Because this is a large area, but what does it mean for a smaller landscape?
You know, a lot of the practices we have here are scalable. A berm and swale may be a little much for the average yard, the urban landscape, but we have a number of rock structures and other types of practices that all work together to slow down your runoff and allow more infiltration. We do other things to build the soil health, to make it hold more water, to make it more readily infiltrate when it does rain. And a lot of that really revolves around the use of native vegetation, as opposed to non-natives who often want more water than our climate wants to provide.
And they have better root systems?
They have much deeper, much generally healthier root systems, so they're a lot less trouble to take care of as well.
All right. And then if all of us would be doing that type of thing, it would help the larger community?
I think that's something to really give a lot of thought to, right? That's a sustainable practice that everybody could easily adopt at some level at their house. It doesn't have to be perfect. Anything helps. So what a great way to save water by putting less on your yard because you decided to use more holistic practices in your landscape that are better suited for the climate that we have.
Yeah, I can see you're using some, but you're also inputting some into the ecosystem.
Right.
So I think that would be very, very helpful.
So, and that's an interesting perspective because we typically, when we think of the term ecosystem services, we think about big properties like this. But I've worked very hard at my house over the last 20 years to provide a number of ecosystem services to all the native birds and the lizards and the snakes. Maybe some people don't want all that in their yard, but I think it's pretty awesome. So, and a lot of that's built around diversity of plants. And I've noticed over the 20 years we've lived there, we've increased the number of species that come to visit every year.
That's a great thing. Well, guys, since the last time I've been here, you have a lot of great, fantastic scientific toys.
Exactly.
So tell us all about them.
Well, we have worked really hard over the last few years to dedicate resources to this property so that we can better quantify how these different practices impact the environment.
So you're going to be measuring these practices.
Right. So if we can measure, for example, we can measure how much water collects in the soil. We can measure how much goes in the ground. But with these boreholes, we can use our tool called a nuclear magnetic resonance tool.
Ooh, do that again, slower.
A nuclear magnetic resonance tool.
Okay.
So maybe the best way to explain that tool is to think of when you need to get an MRI, you can see things going on inside your body, right? And that kind of works by aligning the polar fields with water atoms, or water molecules, not atoms. You can align a water molecule using nuclear magnetic resonance, and when you do that, you can actually measure water content in the subsurface. So we put these 30-foot deep boreholes here. One is above the berm and swale, one's within the swale, and there's one down gradient. Okay. That way we can start to see, well, hey, what's really going on? Well, that water that infiltrates here, how deep does it go? How much does it spread out? How long does it stay in the ground? So it's real important to us to, one, quantify how these things work, but two, start to understand, as Thomas mentioned earlier, where does that molecule of water go when it comes out of the sky? Does it go in the aquifer? Does it go out through respiration from plants? Does it just evaporate? Does it get hung up somewhere in the subsurface? Or does it just run off to the creek? And it's a really interesting concept to try to understand, but it also turns out it's really difficult to figure out. So the first thing we need is rain. That's been the biggest problem. But we've installed all this amazing equipment out here in hopes that we'll start to be able to quantify what happens to a drop of rain when it hits the ground. Where does it go?
Go. That's fascinating. All right. So should we look at some of the places that we saw on our first visit, or should we go somewhere where it has just about everything we need to do?
Yeah, we can take a quick look at our One Rock dams over here that you saw last time, see how they've progressed, but then get a look at really how those look at being installed on a large scale at our channel restoration site.
All right, so let's look at the small one, and then we'll go and look at the big one.
Yep, sounds great.
Well, Thomas, last time I was out here, or the crew was out here, it was just rock. It's really dramatically changed. It's all native grasses or native plants in there. But you have a unique name for this. What do you call this?
Mark, this is called a One Rock Dam, and it's called that.
I see more than one rock.
Yeah,
one rock.
It's called that because it's only one rock high, so none of the rocks get stacked on top of each other. You want every rock making contact with the soil, and if a rock's not making contact with the soil, then it's not doing its job.
Okay. Why do you want it contact with the soil?
Because its purpose is to hold that soil in place to keep water from taking it away and allowing the vegetation to establish around it and up through the cracks, and it also has been built around the existing vegetation. So the whole purpose is not just have rocks here, but it's to recruit vegetation that are going to hold the soil in place better than the rocks can do.
Great idea. And then the vegetation allows the water to infiltrate?
Vegetation will continue to slow down water, continue to improve the soil health, which should allow infiltration and water holding capacity.
Okay. All right. Well, it's amazing. It doesn't look like it looked like originally. It was much more white and soil and bare soil.
Right.
So is this considered a success?
I think so. So far, this has really been a success. We're recruiting more vegetation. You can see more litter on the ground here, more sediments that are being captured as rocks, which is exactly what we intended to do.
Okay. Excellent.
Something to think about is since we've installed this, we're about 1 year behind on rainfall. So we're missing basically a year of rain, yet look, given those circumstances, how well this is vegetated in that time.
Well, particularly the sides of the slope, it looked really amazing. Mark, we were not at the site the last time we were here. So tell me, what's going on here?
So when we got the property, where we're standing now was really nice, deep, organic, rich soil. But this is a good example of sometimes things change, and things that may happen up gradient from where you are may impact you. So what's happened here is we've developed an erosion problem. So we wanted to do some things to follow our rules, slow, sink, and spread water. That's what all these structures are about. We're trying to restore this area, trying to get our soil back and not lose more soil. So we installed this is called the SCAR project.
Okay.
Because from the air, this looks like a giant scar on the landscape. So we came in, we installed all these different practices, different types of rock structures, some brush structures, all with the idea that we can slow down that runoff, we can repopulate the vegetation, we can collect more soil in this area, we can build the quality and health of that soil over time. And again, we can accomplish that overall goal of better soil, better health.
I was going to say, you had a really cool mnemonic device on that. Slow,
sink, spread.
There you go. Say it again.
So we want to slow, sink, and spread.
There you go. Sounds great. Okay. That's water. All right. Hey, Thomas, tell me a little bit about each one of these unique projects or treatments.
Okay, yeah, we have multiple treatments here because they're pretty uniquely installed in our hill country landscape. There's been a lot of installation of these in New Mexico, but not so much here. So we have a series of them here to assess how they're going to perform, and also some experimental structures. So we have our brush mats that are just upstream of us here. So all that brush is put there intentionally to catch sediment, to help establish vegetation, to hold soil in place, and to slow sink and spread water. We have again our one rock dams, as we saw at our other site. So we have some newly installed one rock dams, and right in front of us, this is called a log mat, and it's a little bit hybridized with some aspects of the one rock dam around it. But the logs can actually serve in the same function as the one rock dam does when they're placed in the channel in that fashion.
Okay. And it's just one log deep?
There's one layer of logs there. It does actually have some rocks underneath it to help we don't want water to necessarily wash just underneath those logs either. And that really is dependent on the site you're working with. It may change from site to site how you're going to lay that out.
So Thomas, do you consider this a success then?
So far, without any rain since we've installed it, or no flow but very little rain, I believe it's successful because we can already visually see that there's more vegetation established within the rock structures and brush structures than there are the surrounding area.
You can just see around it, and it's tall, vibrant, and green.
Right.
So I would consider that a success then.
Thank you.
All right. Hey, Mark, I noticed this big white box behind me, but tell me a little bit about what's going on with water quality.
So we have two of those white boxes, and they happen to have a piece of equipment in there called an ISCO sampler. It's an automated sampling device. So we will be taking water samples from the upstream end, where the water's coming in, and the downstream end to measure changes in water quality from the beginning of this treatment train to the end.
Ah, okay. So before and after type of thing.
Exactly.
All right. And what do you expect to see?
Well, what we expect to see is a reduction in suspended sediment.
Okay.
Right? We want to trap all those sediments and keep them on the land surface and out of the creeks. You know, we've got Cibolo Creek just a few hundred yards downstream of us, or down gradient. We don't want those sediments in the creek. We want them on the land surface so they can keep contributing to soil health instead of soil loss.
Yeah.
So
Excellent.
having quantification components to that's really important.
Hey, before we ride off into the sunset, I'd like to thank Thomas and Mark for allowing us to be out here on the EAA Field Research Park. And we really stress the importance of native plants. So if you want to know more about native plants, you should
Visit the EAA Education Outreach Center, which is just next door to us.
Absolutely. Well, thanks everyone for watching the Go Gardening Show. Let's get out there and garden and
Save some water.
absolutely.
Ever wonder where all of the water we use to drink, bathe, cook, garden, and put out fires comes from? Ever wonder how our water supply is safeguarded to ensure it's there for generations to come? The answers to all your questions will be waiting for you at the Edwards Aquifer Authority Education Outreach Center. Book your free visit today at eaaeoc.org. The EOC